So I think there is a temptation in a startup or in a regular company in any part of the world to find some quick bucks, sell the company without disclosing everything about the company. Well, why just Indian startup system? Even American startup system is a scam. Well, true and false. I mean, there are both possible answers to this question. It depends on which startup you're talking about and the time, the era of time or time period of time that you're talking about. There is, in every startup system, ecosystem, there comes a time when there is a temptation of building the startup purely to increase the valuation so that the founders and the investors both can benefit from it. It's unethical. People tell lies. But it's not just startup, it happens with public companies too. We have heard of many public company scams as well. Enron in US and Satyam here. I'm sure these got caught, but there may be 1,000 others who stayed under the radar and still benefited from doing unethical things. So I think there is a temptation in a startup or in a regular company in any part of the world to find some quick bucks, sell the company without disclosing everything about the company. I recently read, I think it was perhaps in US, that a startup got sold to a very large company, and the company found only after buying them that majority of the users they had claimed to have on their platform were actually fake users. What would you say to that? It can happen anywhere in the world, not just in India. But in general, I would say in India, one thing I found is there is lack of innovation. And most of the companies that you hear about here are replica of similar kind of business model, similar kind of product that has existed in some other part of the world, mostly US. Most of the successful companies, of course, like Flipkart and Myntra and all, they are copies of companies which already existed in US, right? So still it doesn't take away from their innovation, but of course business model or idea, the basic core idea was similar to something else that was done in another part of the world. And one of the reasons is there is lack of funding. I've recently been involved in a company and I can see, these founders are really working hard to raise the initial money. But despite getting promises from several seed investors, angel investors, they're not able to close a round. It's not very easy to close a round, to get access to funding here. So I think I must say that kudos to those who managed to raise hundreds of millions of dollars. In many cases, those rounds were led by the VCs from US or who had offices in India, but actually they were from US. So I think it is lack of funding always drives people to do other things. The lack of innovation is perhaps related to that, and temptation to run other scams, that's also kind of related to that, I think. So lack of funding is one thing. If you can fix, I think we should be fine, or we should be in a much better shape. And the lack of government support. Now, government support doesn't mean that government should give funding to startups. I have seen in places like Atlanta, and there we have some very good ecosystem of incubation centers run by Georgia Tech, though it's not fully, it's not a government, but there is some hand of government in it, and a university ecosystem being associated with it that give its credibility to it. So that's kind of very helpful. Those things are lacking in India. So I think having some level of government support in terms of policies, in terms of access to funding, depending you cross a certain threshold, either of innovation or for other funding from other people. I remember raising one of the rounds in one of my startups where they said that they will give you, the incubator will give you 1/4 of your total round. So to get $250,000 from them, you were supposed to have $750,000 commitment from other investors, and they all will pool in money together. I felt it was pretty good. You would get $250,000 from government or government agency just by having some other commitments, and that was pretty good. And sometimes that helped other investors to also be committed because they see some commitment from the government. So hopefully it is helpful to you. It's not really a scam, I would say. It is behavior driven by a lack of funding. And if you fix the funding problem, I think we should be good. Hope it is helpful to you. Thank you.